Are you deaf or just lost? The words cut through the low hum of Ramstein Air Base passenger terminal like a blade through silk. Sharp, deliberate, designed to wound. Colonel Richard Vance stood with his hands planted firmly on his hips, his flight suit pressed to razor-edged perfection, every crease a testament to his meticulous adherence to regulation. He was the embodiment of modern military authority, polished, confident, and utterly intolerant of anything that disrupted his vision of order. The man he was addressing did not look up immediately. He sat in one of the plush chairs near the Space A travel desk, his clothes clean but worn, a faded flannel shirt over khaki pants that had seen better decades. A simple duffel bag, its canvas surface scarred and faded, rested at his feet. When he finally raised his head, his eyes were pale blue, the color of winter sky over the Great Plains, and they held a calmness that seemed to absorb the colonel's hostility without reflecting any of it back. He looked tired, not the fatigue of a long flight, but the exhaustion of a man who had traveled across more than just an ocean. He had crossed a lifetime, wars, losses, decades of silence. "I'm waiting for a flight," the old man said, his voice raspy but steady, like gravel under slow-moving water. Colonel Vance let out a short, incredulous laugh, the kind reserved for people he deemed beneath him. "A flight? With what? A museum pass?" "This is an active military installation," Colonel Vance continued, his voice rising just enough to ensure everyone nearby could hear. "I need to see your identification and your travel orders. Now." He snapped his fingers. It was an arrogant, dismissive gesture, the kind a man makes when he has never been truly humbled. A nearby airman, first class, barely 20 years old and still learning the unspoken rules of military hierarchy, froze mid-step. He had been about to offer the old man a bottle of water, but now he stood paralyzed, caught in the gravitational pull of the colonel's rank. The old man sighed, a slow, weary sound that seemed to carry the weight of decades. He reached into the pocket of his thin jacket and produced a laminated ID card, its edges yellowed and soft with age. He handed it to the colonel without a word. Vance snatched it from his hand, his lip curling in disdain as he examined the faded photograph of a much younger man with the same steady eyes. "Samuel Peterson," Vance read aloud, his tone dripping with condescension. "Retired." He looked up, his gaze sweeping over the old man as if cataloging every sign of weakness, every visible year. "Well, Peterson, your retirement status doesn't grant you access to priority seating meant for deploying warfighters and senior leadership. You see these men and women around you?" He gestured grandly to the uniformed personnel scattered throughout the terminal. "They are the tip of the spear. You are a relic. Now take your bag and move to the general waiting area over there with the rest of the civilians." Samuel Peterson did not move. He simply watched the colonel, his expression unreadable. The kind of stillness that comes not from fear, but from having faced far worse than a man with an inflated ego. "The master sergeant at the desk said I could wait here," Samuel stated quietly, not as a challenge, but as a simple fact. This only seemed to enrage Vance further. His face flushed a dangerous shade of red, the veins in his neck standing out like cords. "Are you questioning my authority? I am a full-bird colonel in the United States Air Force. I am the deputy commander of this wing. That master sergeant works for me, and I am telling you to move." The tension in the immediate area was suffocating. People buried their faces in phones and magazines, pretending not to notice, but everyone was listening. The humiliation was a public spectacle, and no one dared intervene. The young airman who had wanted to help now stared at the floor, his cheeks burning with shame for his own inaction. Samuel Peterson slowly, deliberately, pushed himself to his feet. His joints popped audibly, and he placed a hand on his lower back, a silent testament to the years he carried. He was about to reach for his bag when Colonel Vance, not yet satisfied with his display of dominance, took another step forward. "You know, your generation is what's wrong with this country," Vance sneered, his voice low enough to be just for Sam, but loud enough for those nearby to catch every venomous word. "Thinking the world owes you something for a bit of service you did 50 years ago. I've flown more combat hours in the last 5 years than you probably saw in your entire career. What did you even do? Push papers? Fix radios?" Samuel Peterson's calm finally seemed to crack, but not with anger. A flicker of something else, pity, perhaps, crossed his face. He met the colonel's glare, and for the first time a hint of steel entered his quiet voice. "I served," he said simply. The two words hung in the air like a shield against the barrage of insults. They were an undeniable truth, a bedrock of fact that Vance's arrogance could not erode. But for Vance, this quiet defiance was the final straw. You served? Everyone served. That doesn't make you special. Every pilot, every operator worth his salt has a call sign. It's a badge of honor. So let's have it. What was your call sign? Puddle Jumper 1? Mailman 6? He leaned in, his face inches from Samuel's, a smug, triumphant grin spreading across his features. The terminal seemed to hold its breath. Samuel Peterson held the colonel's gaze. When he spoke, his voice carried an impossible weight. Hawk 8. The words dropped into the silence like a depth charge. For a moment, nothing happened. The name meant nothing to Colonel Vance, who scoffed, ready with another insult. But he never got to say it. Across the room, a grizzled master sergeant with salt and pepper hair and a chest full of ribbons froze mid-sip from his coffee cup. The ceramic mug slipped from his fingers and shattered on the polished floor, the sound unnaturally loud in the sudden, profound quiet. His head snapped toward the old man, his eyes wide with disbelief. Then, with dawning, electrifying reverence, a few older civilian contractors slowly lowered their newspapers. An Army Command Sergeant Major passing through stopped dead in his tracks, his head cocked as if he had heard a ghost. The name echoed in the minds of the few who knew. It was not a name from the officials' histories. It was a name from the shadows, a piece of whispered lore, a legend spoken in hushed tones in classified briefing rooms and lonely forward operating bases. Colonel Vance, oblivious, was about to continue. Hawk what? Is that supposed to? But his words were cut off. The master sergeant who had dropped his coffee was already moving. He strode past the colonel as if he were not there, his back ramrod straight, his movements precise and filled with purpose. He stopped 2 feet in front of Samuel Peterson, his body snapping to the most rigid, respectful position of attention Vance had ever seen. He raised his hand in a salute so sharp it could have cut glass. Sir, the master sergeant said, his voice thick with emotion. Master Sergeant Evans, 3rd Special Tactics Squadron. It is an honor, sir, a profound honor. Vance was utterly bewildered. What in God's name is the meaning of this, Master Sergeant? Stand down. You do not salute a retired civilian in this terminal. But Master Sergeant Evans did not even flicker. His eyes remained locked on Samuel Peterson. I'm not saluting a civilian, Colonel, Evans said, his voice ringing with conviction. I'm saluting a ghost. Just then a new figure entered the scene, drawn by the commotion and the sound of the shattering mug. General Marcus Thompson, commander of United States Air Forces in Europe, was on his way to his aircraft, his 4-star rank parting the crowds like a ship's bow through water. His face was a thundercloud of annoyance. Colonel Vance, what is all this? He boomed, his voice accustomed to filling hangars and commanding obedience. Vance spun around, his face a mixture of shock and relief. General, sir, my apologies. I was just dealing with a civilian who was refusing to... He stopped mid-sentence. The general was no longer looking at him. His eyes, sharp and intelligent, had found Samuel Peterson. The thundercloud on the general's face vanished instantly, replaced by an expression of pure, unadulterated shock, which then morphed into something Vance could not comprehend on the face of a 4-star general. Awe. General Thompson did something that stunned every person in that terminal. He walked directly past the saluting Colonel Vance without a glance. He walked past the still at attention Master Sergeant Evans. He walked straight up to the old man in the faded flannel shirt, stood before him, and rendered the sharpest, most heartfelt salute of his entire decorated career. Sam, the general whispered, his voice cracking slightly. My God, is it really you? Samuel Peterson slowly raised a hand and returned the salute with practiced ease. A small, sad smile touched his lips. It's been a while, Marcus. The entire terminal was now utterly silent and still. Every eye was locked on the tableau, a 4-star general saluting an old man who looked like he did not have a penny to his name. Colonel Vance stood frozen, his mouth slightly agape, his world tilting on its axis. General Thompson held his salute for a long moment before slowly lowering his hand. He turned and his gaze fell upon Colonel Vance. The warmth and reverence in his eyes instantly evaporated, replaced by a glacial fury so intense it made Vance feel like the air had been sucked from his lungs. Colonel, General Thompson said, his voice dangerously quiet, do you have any idea who you were speaking to? Sir, a retired, his ID said Peterson. Vance stammered, his arrogance dissolving into panicked confusion. His name, the general cut in, his voice like chipped ice. is Chief Master Sergeant Samuel Peterson. And while that is the name the Air Force officially gave him, it is not the name by which legends know him. To the men whose lives he saved, to the operators he flew into hell and back, to the very soul of the Special Operations community, he is known by one name and one name only, Hawk 8. The general took a step closer to Vance, his eyes burning with righteous fire. Let me educate you, Colonel, on a piece of history you clearly missed while you were polishing your eagle. In the late 1960s, there was a clandestine unit flying highly modified aircraft over denied territory. They did not officially exist. Their missions were never recorded. The men who flew them were ghosts. Their leader, the pilot who flew the most dangerous missions, the one who wrote the book on high altitude, low opening insertions, the man who could fly a wounded bird through a storm of anti-aircraft fire and bring his boys home, was Hawk 8. He pointed not at Vance, but at Sam. This man flew an AC-130, nicknamed Credible Sport, with rockets strapped to its fuselage in a test for a mission to rescue hostages. The plane crashed. He was burned over 60% of his body. 3 months later, he was flying again. He flew into a valley so deep and so heavily defended, it was called the Devil's Jaw, to rescue a Green Beret A-team about to be overrun. He had no air cover, no support, and one of his engines was on fire. He landed that plane on a strip of dirt no bigger than a football field under constant enemy fire, loaded up every last man, and flew out through the same wall of lead. Every man on that team is alive today because of him. The general's voice grew louder, resonating through the silent terminal. He was shot down 2 years later. He spent 4 years in a prisoner of war camp that no one knew existed. He was declared dead. The Medal of Honor was awarded to him posthumously in a classified ceremony. His family received a folded flag. Then, through a quiet prisoner exchange, he came home. He refused any public accolades. He refused to have his status as a living recipient made public. He just wanted to disappear. He wanted peace. He gave this country his youth, his health, and nearly his life. And in return, he asked for nothing. Nothing. General Thompson turned his full, wrathful attention back to the pale, trembling colonel. You stand here in your perfect uniform, dripping with rank and entitlement, and you berate a man who has more courage, honor, and integrity in his little finger than you will ever possess in your entire lifetime. You questioned his service. Colonel, you are not worthy to stand in the same room as him, let alone breathe the same air. The general's words were not a reprimand. They were a vivisection, laying Vance's character bare for all to see. Master Sergeant Evans, the general commanded. Evans responded instantly. Sir, escort Chief Master Sergeant Peterson to my personal quarters. See that he gets a hot meal, a fresh uniform, and anything else he needs. He is to be my guest for as long as he wishes to stay. Yes, General, Evans said, his voice filled with pride. He turned to Sam. Sir, if you'll come with me. Sam nodded and picked up his worn duffel bag, but before he walked away, he stopped and looked at the utterly broken Colonel Vance. General Thompson addressed Vance one last time, his voice dropping back to that deadly quiet tone. You, Colonel, will report to my office at 0600 tomorrow morning in your service dress uniform. You and I are going to have a very long, very unpleasant conversation about your future. Later that evening, after a hot meal and a long conversation with his old friend, Sam rested in the VIP quarters. There was a soft knock on the door. It was Colonel Vance, his eyes red-rimmed, his uniform immaculate but seeming to hang on a diminished frame. Sir, Vance began, his voice barely a whisper. May I have a word? Sam gestured for him to enter. Sir, there are no words to properly express how ashamed I am. My behavior was inexcusable. It was arrogant, cruel, and dishonorable. I can offer only my most profound and sincere apology. I am sorry, I was wrong. If this story of quiet heroism and the power of humility moved you, please leave your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more stories of courage and sacrifice.